Good evening and welcome to the January 22nd, 2019 regular meeting of the Troy Planning Commission. Copies of the agenda for tonight's meeting are available at the entrance to the room. Additionally, the agendas and minutes of prior meetings are available on the city's website. The meeting will be conducted in accordance with the agenda as presented or amended by the Planning Commission. The roles and responsibilities of the Planning Commission are outlined on the reverse side of tonight's agenda. State law establishes planning commissions. The commission is comprised of 9 members, all of whom have volunteered to serve. Members are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by city council. The other individuals seated at the dais this evening are representatives of the city's planning department, the city's attorney's office, and the city's planning consultant, Carlisle Wortman Associates. If you wish to address the planning commission, please come forward when recognized and provide your name and address on the sign-on sheet. Please begin your remarks by stating your name for the benefit of the commissioners. All remarks are to be addressed to the Planning Commission, not to anyone else in the room. At this time, I ask that all cell phones, Blackberries, PDAs, and any other devices that might disrupt this meeting be either placed in silent mode or be turned off. Ms. Harneke, the roll call, please.
Mr. Abhidian?
Here.
Ms. Cruz?
Here.
Mr. Faison?
Here.
Ms. Fowler? Mr. Hudson?
Here.
Mr. Krent?
Here.
Mr. Rahman?
Here.
Mr. Tagle?
Here.
Mr. Tattapali?
Here. Right there. It's up there.
Quorum present. Item number 2 is approval of tonight's agenda. Mr. Savada.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At a little after 3 p.m. today, we received an email from the petitioner requesting postponement. This is for the item 6, the special use request for the proposed addition for Bethesda Romanian Pentecostal Church. So we would request that the Planning Commission approve the agenda after removing item 6. I would also note that we informed every resident who had submitted a comment on this item via email. We took their email addresses and we emailed them all, informing them of the postponement. That's why I believe it was successful, because there's not as many people here as were here last time. So we did our best to inform them as quickly as we could. It was literally within minutes of knowing that they requested postponement. We wanted to save them the trip here. Mm-hmm. So again, if you could, the Planning Commission would consider removing item 6. They've requested meeting potentially February 26th. That is, I'm not confirming the date, but when we do confirm it, we will inform all the residents within 300 feet of that in writing so that they can attend the meeting.
Okay, thank you. So can I get a motion to approve the amended agenda? Mr. Taylor.
I move that we approve the agenda as amended.
Thank you. Second?
May I make an amendment to that? I think we should delete item 6 on the agenda if they will not be appearing.
Is that different?
Yeah,
than
no, that's
amending?
Second that, but I think that we ought to be deleting that item from the agenda, John, since they won't be appearing.
All right. Well, my intent was to have it removed, but
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that as part of your motion.
yeah, when Mr. Savana said that they wouldn't be coming and that they wanted to delete that or take it off the agenda, and I just said moved as revised.
I missed the last part. I apologize.
Not a problem.
Way to confuse us all.
Well, it's early yet. And I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Ms. Harneke, the vote?
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Rahman?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Abhidian?
Yes.
Mr. Savana?
Yes, just to clarify, if anyone is here to speak on the Bethesda Romanian Pentecostal Church item, it will not be discussed by the Planning Commission this evening.
Thank you. Item number 3 is approval of the minutes for the January 8th, 2019 meeting. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
Move to approve.
Mr. Abhidian, second.
I'll second.
Mr. Krent?
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Rahman?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Mr. Abhidian?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz?
Yes.
Approved. The next item is item number 4. It's public comment for items that are not on the agenda. So if there's anyone who wants to speak on any items that are not on tonight's agenda, please come to the podium. Seeing none, I'll move to item number 5. Special use file number SUJPLN 2018-0018, proposed 901 Tower Retail with drive-through, southeast corner of Crooks Road and Tower Drive, 901 Tower, Section 9, zoned OM office mixed use. Mr. Carlo?
Thank you and good evening. I have a fairly brief presentation tonight for the Planning Commission. We should all be familiar with this project. It was last before the Planning Commission prior to the holidays, and based on direction from the Planning Commission, the applicant has revised their application. Just for background, the site is located at the corner of Crooks and Tower in the North Troy area of town. The site was rezoned by the Planning Commission earlier last year to OM office mixed use. The parcel in question is approximately 11 acres and is improved currently with a 32,000 square foot building. The applicant is asking to infill the corner of the site with a approximately 10,000 square foot retail building. It will include 4 tenant spaces. It does include a proposed drive-through, and that does require special use from the Planning Commission. Planning Commission last reviewed this again, as I noted, in December. At that time, there were a number of comments. However, a focus of the comments really were with regards to the orientation of the building, the orientation of the drive-through, and as well as the access to the rear inside of the building for pedestrian and people that are parking. Based on that comments from the Planning Commission, the applicant went back and took another look at their site plan, and they've made some significant changes to the site plan as submitted. The first is with regard to site reconfiguration. Essentially, they have relocated and moved the drive-through from behind the building to the side of the building, the side of the parking lot. In addition, they've added parking that's directly adjacent to the rear of the building. This allows for a more convenient access to both the drive-through as well as to the rear of the building through that parking area. In addition, they've relocated the building back approximately 17 feet from Crooks Road. This allows for a second row of parking in front of the building. Thirdly, they have revised the elevation and building entrances, and specifically that of the rear building elevation to provide a much more attractive rear elevation for the site. And lastly, they did improve significant pedestrian connections both within the site as well as from the tower building to the proposed mixed-use building as well. With regards to the site plan, the landscape plan, and photometrics, it meets all the ordinance requirements, including the OM bulk requirements. It meets all of the tree mitigation and landscape requirements, and meets the site's photometric requirements. One of the discussions the Planning Commission had at the last meeting was with regards to parking. By ordinance, the applicant is required to provide a total of 543 spaces. This includes 429 for the office building and an additional 114 spaces for the retail building. They are providing, they're seeking approval to provide 516 spaces. You'll note that's a deficiency of 27 spaces. With that 27 spaces, they propose to land bank those spaces around the existing tower building. The applicant feels that they don't need those additional 27 spaces. However, they can build those in a future time if it is such needed. However, they feel that they would rather just land bank those at the time being. We do note that we have looked at the location. It has not been fully vetted by city staff, and we find that this is something that if the Planning Commission is okay with land bank parking, the actual location and orientation of that can be worked out administratively moving forward. In regards to elevations, the top elevation is the front elevation that you'll see from Crooks Road. The right elevation is the side of the elevation adjacent to the opposite side of the drive-through elevation. The rear elevation is on top, showing the entrances and the much more articulation along that elevation. And lastly, the left elevation is the elevation that is for the drive-through window. And finally, in the recommendation, the applicant has revised the site layout based on Planning Commission comments. The Planning Commission is asked to consider the proposed land bank parking. And if the land bank parking is approved by the Planning Commission, we do recommend preliminary site plan approval. As well as special use approval. Thank you.
Are there any Planning Commission comments for the consultant? I had one. You had mentioned the improved pedestrian access to the site in the revised plan. Could you just touch on that?
I'd love to, but I knocked off the presentation on the screen. There's both a, there's actually, now with the revised site plan, there's actually a much more direct connection where you only have to cross one drive aisle to get from the tower building to the retail building. In addition, by switching and moving the drive-through to the side of the building, they've allowed for much more direct connection to the rear of the building through the parking lot as well. So by those improvements, they have greatly increased the pedestrian connections to the building.
Thank you. Any other questions? So with that, I'll invite the applicant to come up and speak.
Thank you, Larry Goss, for the petitioner. Happy New Year, everyone. Nice to see you again. As you can see, when we received your comments from our last visit here, we took them very seriously. There were a lot of good comments, and we went back to the drawing board and found, we think, some good solutions. And in fact, thank you for your comments because they really enhanced our plan. At the end of the day, I think the city is going to end up with a better plan, and we think we'll end up with a better product. So your comments were well-founded and appreciated, and I think we responded to those and actually ended up with a much better plan. So happy to answer any questions that you might have. Oh, by the way, I also have my team from PEA and NOR Architectural here in case there were questions related to site planning or the architectural.
Do we have any questions for the applicant? Mr. Tagle.
Not a question, but a comment. Thank you for listening. I think the project is a much better project than it was before us before.
Thank you.
Mr. Krent?
Just a quick thought. Thank you again for revising. It's a much better solution. Appreciate your work.
Thank you.
Ms. Cruz?
I'm curious as to, given the fact that you, under this special use zoning, would have been allowed up to 5 stories, why you chose to keep it at 1?
5 stories or
Isn't that
5 stores? I'm sorry, what?
5 stories. You could have gone a lot higher.
Oh, I could have gotten a lot higher.
You could have gotten a lot higher, given the zoning and the location
that
you're in.
The upper stories would have been office, and we didn't feel that the market needed more office space right now. We still have a significant amount of vacant space in our building, as well as the building across the street still has a tremendous amount of vacant space. So building more speculative office space didn't seem to be a good response to the market.
But we don't have enough retail space or enough restaurants?
Well, the market study that was done when I was part of the town center study indicated that actually there is a need for more restaurants. So I was following along those recommendations.
Thank you.
Mr. Apahidian.
Just wanted to echo what was already mentioned. Thank you for listening, and this site is significantly improved from what was there before. Just the parking on the west side, adding that road parking, I think is going to be a huge benefit to those tenants there. And the access, I was just kind of analyzing the access and the pedestrian crosswalk. I think is it provides better visibility for pedestrians crossing there in the southeast corner of that lot. And just overall, I think it's a huge improvement to what was there submitted initially. So thank you again.
Thank you.
I'm ready for a resolution.
I was going to say, if there's nothing else. Are you ready for a resolution?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, resolve that special use approval and preliminary site plan approval pursuant to Articles 8 and 9 of the zoning ordinance as requested for the proposed retail center with drive-through, including the location of 27 land-baked parking spaces located on the southeast corner of Crooks and Tower, 901 Tower. Section 9, currently zoned OM, Office Mixed Use District, be granted.
We get a second? Mr. Tagle. Ms. Sarneke?
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Rahman?
Yes.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes?
Mr. Apahidian?
Yes.
Ms. Cruz?
No.
Mr. Faison?
Yes. Motion passes.
very much. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Man, that was fast.
Moving to item number 7, public comment for items on the current agenda. Is there anyone that wants to make any comments on items on tonight's agenda? Seeing none, we'll go to Planning Commission comments. I will start with Mr. Tagle.
I have no comments tonight, thank you.
Mr. Krent? Nothing from me? Ms. Cruz?
Yeah, I have a couple of comments to make. I know I was the sole dissenter tonight on tonight's project. And I know that on special use, we do sort of a case-by-case basis with each project that comes in front of us. But I've noticed that recently, most of our projects are some sort of special zoning, and we've had quite a few projects come before us where there has been an opportunity to create more density or to have more height in buildings. And so, I can remember a couple of years ago as a planning commission, we had a conversation around the value that we placed on having taller buildings in the areas of the city that allowed for that. And I think that we placed value on having density, and we had a vision of what we wanted that Big Beaver corridor to look like in terms of height and density. And yet we seem to be approving a lot of projects that are single story in nature. I would like for us to, not lose sight of the forest for the trees. I know that with our last project with the Cooper's Hawk restaurant, that was a rezoning of the Big Beaver district well into what I thought was a residential neighborhood. And while we didn't have a lot of neighbors here to complain about the rezoning of a Big Beaver district zone in their neighborhood, there's that creep that's happening, and it's outside of what's proposed in the master plan. And yet another single-story building along Big Beaver. So I just would like to bring us back around to, some of the original discussion that we've had as a planning commission about what we see as the vision for this city and how we want it to look and the direction that we want it to go. We've had a lot of projects come before us that have really upset a lot of the neighbors. Some of it has been, under our discretion and our control. Some of it hasn't been. But I think that, we need to be mindful of creating that balance between what the ordinances require and let us do and how that impacts the optics of the people that live, work, and pay taxes in this city. And then finally, honestly, I am not a huge fan of drive-through facilities in areas where there is particularly high traffic. And I do think that corner of Big Beaver and Crooks, that whole area there has, really dense traffic, and I'm not convinced that a drive-through is appropriate there. So I've said my piece, but I would just like to remind us all that, let's not lose sight of the forest for the trees and getting so focused on individual projects that we've lost sight of what it is we really want for this city, what we've talked about, and what we're hearing from the residents themselves.
Thank you. Mr. Hudson.
I want to commend Brent for your public service in taking the time to notify everybody who expressed an opinion on the church with the adjournment. I think that's great. It can't do anything but enhance the reputation of the city and its citizens that we're attentive and we're working with them.
Mr. Rapidian?
Thank you, I'm good. I have nothing.
Mr. Raleigh?
I'm good, thanks.
Mr. I'm going to get your name right. Mr. Tadapali. No. Ms. Zarnicki?
No, thank you.
Ms. Carlisle?
No comment.
Ben? Brent?
No comment.
And Julie?
So Wednesday is the big day on Tullbrook. I head down to Cincinnati on Tuesday for oral argument in federal court on the McClure apartments on Wednesday. So,
Okay.
I'll show you.
And nothing from me, so we are adjourned.
Hey, you got it easy.